Well, welcome guys, the Retroid Pocket 2 Plus is finally with us, and in this video we'll be looking into a quick setup guide when you initially got it, as well as try and push some emulation, see if we can get more any compatibility, some hints and tips. I'm not actually endorsed or sponsored by the company Retroid Pocket 2, I just really enjoy the product. So if you guys can actually help out this channel by easily just clicking like and subscribe, that'd be absolutely awesome. All I have to mention, as a collector and a bit of a gamer myself, I always appreciate the original hardware. There's nothing more special than holding that physical media, and emulation will always be emulation, but there's always benefits as well with this, with actual ROMs that have been translated, that would never been translated by original companies, as well as getting those games that are just really hard to get or just too expensive these days. Now, before we get into a quick setup guide of what the new features bring to this Plus system, there's some additional features physically that's been brought to the hardware. When you originally purchased this, you had two options. You can have it all built in one, including the new buttons, the new D-pad, as well as the touchscreen. It's all built in just like the original Retroid Pocket, but with those features. But I purchased the upgrade board that included the D-pad buttons and the actual physical buttons as well. And you can see closely now with the original Retroid Pocket, the buttons are quite small and quite easy to trigger and quite slippery, but the new buttons now are quite thicker and do have a bit more of a feedback, which is definitely more of an improvement. And the D-pad itself is raised quite a bit. It's got more of a squidgy type of feel, but it just got a nice little feedback. I would prefer more of a clicky response and nothing too spongy, but I would say it's definitely an upgrade. Sorry to interrupt, but post-production Jay is here and I've ended up going pretty big with this review. Originally I was going to be doing it in section by section and upload it weekly, but why not start and go big for 2022? So grab yourself a cuppa or a coffee and hopefully you, the retro gaming emulation gang, will enjoy this video and stick with it. So let's head back into comparing the original specs of the RP2 with an RP2 Plus. For the game change in specs and the hardware, there's a nice little jump when compared to the original, with the OG clocking at a 1.54 core. Now we're upgraded to a Unox quad-core Tiger T310, which has been praised for its power management as well, so expect further well-managed higher power processing, lasting longer, especially for its lower power usage as well. So expect quicker and better battery charging efficiency, and it does have an improved GPU for better compatibility. The RAM has been pushed up to 2GB, not exactly a giant leap, especially this day and age, but it is a DDR4 plus 32GB eMMC, meaning some pretty damn fast 2GB, especially for this budget. The Wi-Fi is a really good jump with 5G connectivity, so expect better gaming streaming experience. The OS is now upgraded from 8.1 to Android 9.0. Also, feedback rumble is now integrated. This will be interesting and wonder how this turns out. And it does include a complete revamp of its own launcher and front end. Well, apologies first for the camera location and lighting. I just got really excited when I finally got this in my hands. Now, this is the first time I've booted this up. This is all real time, no editing. And I'm not really sure what to expect here. So we got the Retroid Pocket 2 logo, and we're greeted with a Game Boy Advance style introduction. Not really unique, but a pretty nice touch. So what do we have here? So it's still loading up, and now we are greeted with the installation, so a nice little professional touch. And really easy to get you guys going. So we've got you select your language, which is pretty nice. Let's just skip all these. Connect to the internet first. But I'm going to skip past this because I don't want to show you my details with that. But I did manage to connect and it was pretty easy and simple. So let's skip past this bit. Select your time zone. I guess when you're online it doesn't even matter. But this is very important. Enable Google Play services. So this is where you get all your apps and access Google Play, so you want to make sure you can do that, which is a new touch when you updated the previous Retroid Pockets. Now we can actually select the pre-installed apps, so you can choose whatever you want when you're installing this for the first time. So I'm not going to go with everything, but I'm going to go with the essentials. So as you can see, it's very different to the original Retroid Pocket, and how you set that up. This is a really clean, simple solution of just getting things started. So what do we have? We have duck emulation, which is PS1. We have dig, which is a great front end. We have the PS, PPS, whatever it is. And we have flycast, which is really nice. Now here I'm just going to speed things up because this did take just about a minute or two. and then you're greeted with a launcher selection. You can either choose the new RP2 Plus launcher or stick with a generic Android type of style launcher. But of course, I'm going to try the RP2. Now everything's completed. Now that was a pretty simple, fast way to get things going. Very happy with the experience on that. Now there was a problem when I first boot this up. You can see in the top left hand corner, you see that the joystick is not collaborated. So I could actually move around, but it was struggling a bit. So this is the first thing it asks you to do. But if you don't have a touchscreen, how do you actually select up there? But there's one way I got around to this, was using the OTD adapter that I had with my original Retroid Pocket. I plugged in an additional controller, then I set it to mouse mode by just holding down the home button, much like the original Retroid Pocket if you wanted to get that mouse control. Held it down for a couple of seconds, and then I could control it with the controller. For some reason I couldn't select it without plugging in a controller. Once I got that selected, I then unplugged it, and then I could collaborate. That's how I got around to it. I know that's a bit of a ridiculous fiddle. Now this is what you're greeted with, the first launcher. Though this is completely different from the original Retroid itself. It's just completely blank canvas, so this is what you have to work with. So you got some menu selections at the bottom. You got emulation, add app, and you got back and OK. Very simple layout. So if you wanted to emulate and see what actual games you got, this would be completely blank, but I have done this before. I have set this quite a lot to my liking. So if you wanted to add another system, it is pretty simple. Just click on systems and then you can choose which one you wanted to add. So for instance, let's go PSP. Let's press OK. There it is. So now we want to add the ROMs. So we got to add this path, so everything is set up onto a ROMs folder on my SD card. So I go to there and I go to my SD card and I scroll down, find my ROMs and locate PSP. There it is. But now I have to hold down the home button because I have to select that little box. Can't do that with the controller. There we go. Now select. Then we want to tick that box again. Then we want to scan. There we go. So there's our games. It hasn't actually found any of our ad. It has done that okay with the other systems. For instance, my N64. It does seem to squish the ratio because the box art is different to the 4x3 that this actually wants to lay out. So for PlayStation, they're fine. PSP, it doesn't seem to locate them. So now we want to edit it. And we want to choose the emulator. So they're the ones that it's going to go with. You can have the purchase PPSP, and then you have the retro arc emulator. So I'm just going to go with the app, and it does give you some other settings to choose from. You can use your default, things like that. So it is pretty simple. Just choose the app and save. Go back. And let's try some Yakuza. So it's that simple. Just to get into games. If you want to quit, press home, and then if you want to clear all your RAM to make it more optimized, head to the time. It's a very little cheeky little way to do it, and it wipes it all ready for you. But if we go to the systems, there's not many. Well, there is quite a bit to choose from, but for instance, there's no Mega Drive, there's no Mega CD or 32X. It'd be nice to have this updated so you can choose which ones and make this your main front end. So that's not the way I like to do it. So we want to add app, and this is all the apps that has been installed. So this would have all your pre-installed. I have added furthermore, and let's go with Dig, an awesome front end, and then there's RetroArch. So let's click on Dig. This is already set up with a theme. If you're interested in this theme, if you like the look of it, I will put the link in the description box below. That will head to my website for you guys to download. And if you wanted to add it yourself, you just then locate it onto your SD card. When you've put it on there, go to themes and then install theme and select. It is named after Card Panel's theme, so I would put the credits who originally designed that. It's just kind of a modification of that. So this is how it's looking all together. And if you want to quit, bam, that's how it is. It is a really simple way an OS to get around things. In the top left hand corner, it's kind of designed like the Switch. If you go there you can actually change the name of the profile, so you can actually add different profiles, so when you log in you can choose a different user. So I've changed my ad to the logo, I've got my name, and you can also change the color scheme. I'm gonna go with dark just to suit the rest of my Retroid. So you can set this up the way that you like, and if you go to the settings, there's a more of a linear type of experience with this. It's definitely more responsive than the original Retroid Pocket, the original firmware. That was a bit sloppy and a bit of a mess, but now this is more of a solid experience. So if we go to the settings, then it's kind of more like a phone app. I would like it to have its own type of feel, but it does the job pretty nice. So this is where you can access all the settings and things. There's not much that you need to do at all to get things going to be optimized. I've just left it the way it is. But one of the very first things I made sure I did was to update it. So you can check the update. Mine is on version 1.00.7, but when I first did the update, there was a bit of a problem. It just would not actually find the update. It just popped up with some Chinese lettering, and then some day later, and the next day I did try it again and it worked fine. It did take about 5 minutes. It just kind of installed it, rebooted the handheld itself, and that only took about 2 to 3 minutes, and I was good to go. I don't know the difference at all, but I am looking forward to further updates. So you can do things like change the wallpaper, change the brightness. You can trigger the actual home button to do something else, but I'm just going to leave it the way it is. You can also change the font style. You can do a lot of things, but I just like the way it is. But if you didn't want this layout, you can always quit, and this is more like the Android layout. So this is all your apps in one place. You can rearrange this the way you like, and if you wanted to enter the mouse mode, hold down the home button just like the original one. There's no touchscreen emulation, there's just the mouse. This works pretty awesome. It's a lot better than the original experience. And if you wanted to head back to the launcher, you just select Retroid Launcher and you're back in there. But this is what originally boots into every time. Now this is the handheld settings where you can change a bit more like what you do with connecting TV and with the USB. So here you can change your input controls, change your controller style, and this is where you collaborate your joystick in case you get any more problems. But so far I've used this quite extensively and I've had no problems with the input of the device and anything registering. It's been a pretty awesome experience. Now there are some additional features I would like this to bring, but I'll explain that later on in this video. Now here is something completely fresh just for the Plus system, which is a floating control panel that you can have access if you just had the touchscreen by holding down the right hand side, or holding down the mouse button. You can then see the little indication on the right hand side of the screen. Here is a quick access where you can key adapt and put things on the screen mapping. So you can access the buttons to trigger things that would be placed on a touch screen itself. Also you can speed up the RAM by just removing any background progressing. You can record what is actually on the screen, which I find pretty amazing. I did test this out, and you're pushing out the 640x480 resolution. You can take screen snaps, and here is something really big for this system, and that is to go live streaming. So that's pretty big news, especially for the power that this handheld has. And I did test this out, and I couldn't manage to get this going. For instance, I did manage to sync up my Twitch account, but that's all it's doing is just continue to buffer, or it just has trouble finding the audio information. With the RetroArch that came included, for some reason it did not onto the apps. So I had to head to the website itself of RetroArch and download the latest Android version, the 4-bit version, because this is compatible with that. If you guys want more detailed information on how to do this yourself, just let me know in the comments box below and I'll be happy to do so. But in this video we're just going to show you further benefits with the Retroid Pocket Plus and what we can push more out of this. So when it comes to the N64, this is a new console that I'm trying to manage to push out. Now, emulators do work better with certain games. We got to find out which actually works the best, but I'm just going to use the one that was pre-built in. So we do have some minor problems. The frame rate is not too bad considering what I experienced. The original game does not run that great as well, especially with the frame rates. The game is playable to a certain standard, and I'm sure there are some settings you could play around to get a better experience, to get those frame rates steady. The control mappings are not the best, and is recommended to set it up per game, as it's all over the place when you first start this app up. Two quick examples of titles that run great with the built-in emulator and are very playable is Mario Kart 64, which is awesome. Very tempted to set this up with the OTG cable that you saw at the intro of the video to get 4 players out of this. Another one is Mario 64, which is great news, no settings adjusted again, straight off the bat. It's a shame the 64 is a pain to emulate, it kind of always has been, unless you pack in some serious horsepower. It's all about test and try with the RP2, but it does pack enough power to get things going. and all depends as well on bringing more compatibility with adjusting the emulator settings as well as different emulators. One emulator app that I found works pretty well is the Super 64. I thought I'd test something a bit more demanding like Perfect Dark, as the original console needed extra RAM to get this game going. We are still struggling to get a solid 30 frames per second, but I found the game runs better than GoldenEye. Another quick mention, which I found pretty nice, is now with DS emulator Drastic, which has great compatibility, but a pain to work with if you just got the one screen or not even using touchscreen. But when it's all set up, it's all good. The API 2 Plus now handles high 3D rendering very well with a great steady high frame rate on the handful of titles that I tried. Some ROMs can also be modded to already be adaptable for non-touchscreen features. As we are on about previous compatible systems with the OG, now with the Plus, using DuckStation via the app or even through the core with RetroArch, you can now set it to ×2 resolution and add in further extra features to provide those wibblies and wobbly textures that the PS1 was renowned for. But this can help towards some minor dips in some frame rates that do happen rarely here and there. And with all the enhancements on, it can trigger some glitches in the texture mappings, so it does take some setting adjustment, but definitely a better PS1 experience with the Plus. Moving on and being very hopeful is testing out the GameCube emulation using the built-in emulator Dolphin, which can also play Wii games. So just about making it with handling the N64 emulation, mostly due to its software and not the hardware being the problem. You already guess it, it doesn't work great, struggling around about 15 frames per second in gameplay with Mario Kart. But you will find with the in-game menu and selection does run really well, which is quite deceiving. I'm sure you can get some lighter 2D base games that run really well. The guys at Retro Handheld Group are working on a compatibility list, which I also include in the description box below, with recommended settings, which is great, and apparently Tales of Symphonia is 100%, with just some minor crackling with the sound here and there. Hope to see what if these guys can bring with the N64, with recommended settings and adjusted emulator. Now let's check out another system the original Retroid Pocket struggled with, and other devices with the same chipset, the Sega Dreamcast. With the emulator that it comes with, called Raycast, the app seemed to struggle with trying to locate the BIOS file and the ROMs. So I managed to put that aside because that was just being a bit of a nightmare. So I recommend using this Flycast. So I downloaded that straight away, and it picked up the files in the same folder and positions that was already set up for Raycast. So that was all good to go. Never really personally dwelled into emulation of the DC and didn't really expect much out of this, but the handful of games I tested were running at a solid 60 frames or even 30 frames. Take a look now at Power Stone, here running pretty great. Running on both the original Retroid Pocket on the left and now the new Retroid Pocket 2 Plus on the right, you can definitely notice the difference in frames. But of course, emulation will be emulation. When running one of my personal favourite RPGs, Grandia 2, running pretty smooth and a good experience, but there are some problems with the shadowing and lighting. And of course some little sound audio hiccups. That is why the original is always going to be the best. But even to my surprise, even Optimus Wave games were running pretty great. Now this is just a handful of games I tested myself, but of course experience will be different with different games, and of course with different emulators, but one I do recommend is Redream. This emulator found the games pretty simple and included the game art. When you purchase the app, you then have access to HD modes, so you can actually choose different resolutions. You can bump it up just slightly to about 720p with the same performance. Just to mention about PlayStation 2 emulation, in case you find yourself wondering, this is one of the hardest consoles to emulate and does need some serious horsepower due to its original architecture. I tried to use the latest Aether SX2, I think that's how you pronounce it, but I only tried a couple of games, but even though the game menu system was pretty smooth experience, the emulation was even worse than the GameCube, so I wouldn't even bother touching it, but you may be a bit lucky with a couple of titles. Now here's a handheld system I personally be most excited to test out, and that is the PSP. One that the emulator PP, that's how you call it, is a pretty sweet running emulator with many options to choose from to really optimize your experience. I just tested about 3 games, as now my SD card was getting pretty full. The Retroid Pocket does seem to have the necessary hardware specs to get this running, and there are a lot of settings and fiddling around that you optimize more experience. But straight off the bat, I would say there's enough power, except for with God of War. I didn't test that out, but I'm really sure that is a big hardware pusher. But with these games, I was still running really steady at the ×2 resolution. Now here's a quick question to ask: is it really worth playing the PSP games on this device? Personally, as the screen ratio is designed for 4:3, it's not really suitable, but when this was hooked up to a TV with some widescreen settings, it is then a better experience. There are definitely a lot more systems I'd love to check out on this awesome handheld and really push its compatibility even further. A nice, I would say, Easter egg I found in here. On the main memory, you will find a system folder containing RP3 settings folder. Pretty interesting. This is when probably people are able to carry over their system settings to the new and up and coming release. Due sometime, well, who knows. This is all we got at the moment. And of course, running on an Android system, unlike most of its competitors out there, you have access to the Play Store titles, and with its higher power and later Android firmware with better compatibility, it's so much more of a better experience, running higher demanded games on medium settings, as well as pushing certain titles on high graphic settings. You are of course limited to its controller accepted games, but having a controller map and overlay app does really help with this. If you manage to get the touchscreen as well, you're in for a win-win. Though with the size of the screen and its overall design, touchscreen only games is not really its intended purpose. I personally would not recommend using it just for that, but the functionality does really help a lot with menu and OS navigation. Now with all that out of the way, let's look at some features I really want this handheld to be updated with. There's only just a couple, but some that would really benefit this. The shell I've actually got, this black one, does look really nice, I must say, but the grime and the sweat just really shines on this. It just pick it up. I did have some other colours with the original Retroid Pocket and didn't really show that well, but if there was an upgrade shell that you could purchase, that would be awesome. But you have to include the screen itself. That's what would bump up the price. I know a lot of people have requested L3 and R3 clicky buttons, and this R stick does work, but of course an upgraded one just like the one on the left hand side would be sweet. Another feature is the HDMI output. When you plug this into a TV, you get in the native resolution that this handheld can handle, which is 640 by 480. If there was a TV mode that can bump up the resolution to 720p or even 1080, so you can have a wide screen ratio to really customize your own menu, I think that would be great, and the games will polish up even better onto the HD screen. So some couple of extra settings with the TV output would be nice. Okay, it does need a couple of tweaks just to get more of a controlled balance. And perhaps some OTG support. The one they came with, just a little USB, it is compatible with and it actually works fine. But it would be nice to know and understanding to try and get some sort of information, to try and get your own type of dock in bay, and that would be pretty sweet. Now for part 3, it's all up to you guys. Let me know in the comments box below of what you want to find out more about the system. So as always, thanks for watching. If you guys want to help and support the channel, click that like, click subscribe, leave a comments below, and I catch you lot on the next video.